Hello, welcome to the Women in Innovation webinar. I'm Lisa Felton, Head of Vodafone Foundation. Although I'm not able to join you in person today, I am with you in spirit. For more than 2 decades, Vodafone has taken the lead supporting technology for good. And we know that there are many women entrepreneurs who are creating solutions to address some of the most critical issues around the world. However, we also realise that women are the least funded, supported and represented. And for women of colour, these hurdles are becoming even more critical and daunting. So far, the issues have been discussed ad nauseum. It is time for women to come up for solutions for women. That is why I'm proud that we're holding this panel today, represented by experienced female entrepreneurs, including and especially women of colour, to talk specifically about women for women and what we can do to assure success so that their solutions can reach markets that much faster to serve their communities. Although Vodafone America's Foundation and MIT Solve have been working together for the past 7 years supporting solutions for women, this is the first collaboration to launch a webinar specifically by women for women. I'm looking forward to hearing about exciting dialogue. Thank you and have a wonderful panel today.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. We wish you were here, but thank you for your words and from across the country. Now I'm thrilled to introduce June Sugiyama. She's the director of the Vodafone America's Foundation and has been a huge supporter of Solve for many, many years, and we're so thrilled to have her. June has been a champion of empowering girls and women through technology and innovation through the 20-year tenure that she's had in corporate philanthropy. So June, welcome to the virtual stage, and give us a little introduction. Tell us why you're excited to be here and kind of what about your background and your tenure in your work has led you to this place. And we'll pop you off mute. Let's see, June, are you able to unmute? There we go.
Yeah. Are we good?
We're good. Go for it.
Oh, good. Hi, good morning. I happen to be broadcasting here from the lobby of a building of an event. A UN event is happening over there for UN Expo, Women in Entrepreneurship. And I've been attending many of the conferences here during Women's Week and have learned a lot. Tara had a conference just yesterday. Day before yesterday, and I've learned a lot from them too. So firstly, I'd like to start out by thanking Rachel and Mackenzie for working hard to get this webinar to fruition. And secondly, I'd like to thank the women that are on the panel today, Naledi, Catherine, Tara, and Kristen. I thank you for your brain power, your experience, and just your time for being here. You are all treasures. So a little bit about me. Rachel was very sweet to say I've been here at Vodafone 20 years or so. So I've been here for a long time, supporting the foundation. But just to explain kind of what Lisa explained, why Vodafone is here. Vodafone, as Lisa said, has been under the belief that technology can make a difference. And we also know that technology, together with women, can make an incredible impact. So that's why we've not only supported women like the ones that are on the panel here today and their projects, but also platforms like Fast Forward and MIT Solve to create workshops and webinars specifically for women. For those of you who are in the audience today, you're really in for a treat. The women on the panel are rich, smart, they're successful, they're experienced, and they've traveled the journey already, so that you can learn from them. And, I've been at several meetings here this week, and there are some common messages. And 2 simple common messages have been, be bold and dream big. And these women on the panel have done that. And so have fun, and enjoy yourselves and learn big. Thanks,
Thanks.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much, June. All right, well, without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists for today. We have people from all over the United States as well as globally. So we're excited to have everyone come together and talk more about their work, more about the tech and data and innovation that they use in their daily lives, and their experiences and barriers that they have overcome. So I will have everyone introduce themselves because you know more about yourselves and I don't want to speak for people. So we'll go through, but we're so thrilled to have Kristen, Naledi, Catherine, and Tara join us today from different spots around the globe. So Kristen, we'll start with you. 30-second intro. Who are you? What is Waking Women Healing Institute? Tell us everything.
Well, poso everyone, nat timatamo, natakam, wapashi ni totam, kayas mamachi tok, omat nomanewik. So my English name is Kristen Welch. I'm a descendant of the Menominee Nation located here in Wisconsin and the founder and executive director of Waking Women Healing Institute. So we are an Indigenous women and survivor-led nonprofit in our 4th year, and we provide direct services in healing, prevention, and response to Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, trafficking, and families of missing, murdered Indigenous women and people.
Thanks, Kristen. Naledi.
Hi, everyone. I'm the co-founder of Frosthorn, and we enable the rural poor in Africa to connect with the digital world and the internet without data bundles or smartphones. So we enable them to access information, markets, and various other opportunities and resources that help them thrive. I'm really excited to be here and to contribute to this discussion. Thank you.
Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine D'Ignazio. And like everyone else, it's thrilling to be here. And thank you so much for making this space. So I'm a professor in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT. And I also direct a lab called the Data Plus Feminism Lab. And what we try to do is use data and computation and AI and digital tools in the service of racial justice. So that our main question is, how do we take all these new technologies and use them in a kind of very explicit way towards justice?
Thanks, Catherine. Tara.
Hi, everyone. I am the founder and CEO of Technovation. We are the largest technology competition for girls ages 8 to 18, and girls find problems in their communities, work with teams of other girls and mentors, and either build a mobile app or an AI-based solution and then test a business idea and pitch in front of judges. So the whole 12-week experience is really sort of the seed of getting them started as tech entrepreneurs. So we run in 120 countries and we've been supported by Vodafone for many years. So we're very thankful to be here.
Great. Thanks all. We're just going to dive right into questions. These women have such a wealth of knowledge and such cool work that they do every day in their daily lives, in their offices, in their fields, that we'll jump right in. So Tara, I'll start with you because you were the most recent introduction. So you talked about your education profit, Technovation, and working specifically with girls ages 8 to 18. What do you see as some of the successes and barriers for that group of young women? And how might people on the panel here, the other women here, or participants who have joined us, how might they help the people that have quote unquote made it already as entrepreneurs or founders?
Yeah, so our program is based on the principles of motivation theory and how do you motivate people who don't necessarily have an identity as a problem solver or as an innovator to develop that. And basically there are 5 principles. The first is having choice. So we instead of doing like a project at the end of a coding class, we actually start with find a problem in your community that you care about, that aligns with your values. And that means you have to first question, what are your values? And so that is a very, very important part of it. So these are all reasons, the ones that I'm outlining are reasons why we are successful in empowering girls to think of themselves as tech innovators. Number two is you work with other girls in teams. We as humans, we love to work with one another. And usually school doesn't have those kinds of opportunities where you're working in teams on something that matters to you. Number three is it helps you find your sense of purpose. It's a project that helps you build your identity. They're adolescent girls. That's a big question. Who am I? What am I here for? So the curriculum really helps you do that. The fourth piece is mentorship. This is something that is very, very difficult to do at large scale. And we've really intentionally built this in. And we found that when teams don't have a mentor, they're not likely to finish the program. So whenever girls are partnered with mentors, there's like a 95% chance of succeeding through the whole experience. And lastly is a sense that there's a physiological element to learning and building a sense of identity. And we typically forget that when we think about education or cognitive experiences. And so we have a pitch event at the end where we have hundreds of pitch events around the world where girls get up on stage and the whole community comes and cheers for them. And that results in a physiological response that you don't forget because you're nervous, you get up on stage, but then all these people that you know or don't know really cheer for you. So that whole experience results in a successful, strong identity that lasts with these girls for almost decades. And so now we're the only program in the world that has this long-term impact that shows this experience results in that transformative identity. In terms of barriers, I mean, the world is full of barriers, right? And I think each one of those that I outlined as those principles, they can be flipped as barriers as well. When you don't find a mentor, you will not succeed. When you don't have a supportive peer group, this will not work. When you don't have supportive parents, this will not work. And so that's why I think the research principles also double up as like your gender inclusion checklist or your formula for making this work. And how can you incredible leaders help? I think being role models is very, very important. And I think we work with leaders to profile their stories of what were the challenges that you overcame and what were the strategies you used to overcome them. I think whenever you share your story, sharing those is very key because those are practical ways for others to follow. But very, very concretely, this year we have 30,000 girls who have registered for Technovation, and they're going to be submitting their project ideas, and we need thousands of judges to review them. And it's a very, very small time commitment. So I encourage all of you to sign up as judges and to give feedback to these girls to encourage them to keep going and launch their businesses.
Perfect. So we'll keep that in mind as a call to action for the end. Thank you, Tara. You mentioned some research principles and some other things. So Catherine, tell us a little bit more about the Data Plus Feminism Lab at MIT. Specifically, for someone that is brand new to that intersection at an academic institution, why is data a necessary component of gender justice, and how might data be a part of each of the panelists' work? How might they see that?
Sure, thanks for that question. Yeah, like we start from the premise that, many of the problems of gender justice and racial justice and other forms of injustice as well, like economic injustice, those are structural problems. So those are macro problems. And data is something that is really helpful, and also communicating data through visualizations and maps and things like this is something that's really helpful for showing structural issues, kind of showing what's at the root of some of these things. In many ways, the way that data has evolved has been very extractive and reductive and exclusionary for women, also for people of color, also for Indigenous people. And so the ways that data have been used often have worked to sort of like extract value or erase people's lives. And so one of the things that we advocate for is a more feminist way of working with data, which is a way that kind of recognizes the sort of inherent structural issues in the world and approaches data with the goal of not operating in those harmful ways of the past, but taking a critical lens so that we can use data for more liberatory ends, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, and so the work that we try to do at the Data Plus Feminism Lab, though, is not only about, I would say, using data to show problems. I mean, data's really good at showing problems. But then it's also thinking about like, what are ways that we can use data as almost like a campfire, like it's like a gathering space. So it becomes a space where communities can gather and we can think also about shared solutions and paths forward. And one of the things that we very much believe again, which is kind of different than how conventional data science has been wielded, is like typically it comes from on high from experts and paints pictures of like deficits and problems of communities that are harmed. I mean, I just think of like lots of the diagrams of like women in STEM, like where are all those women? What's their problem? Why aren't they going into STEM, you know? And so that's is more of like a deficit framing. But in fact, one of the things we think is that with participatory methods and with valuing community knowledge at the table in the process of data collection and analysis and so on, communities know how to solve their own problems. They don't need people, like they don't need data scientists from outside. They definitely don't need AI models solving their problems. So we can think about how we bring people together around data and then use data to make arguments that support where the community wants to go, always in the service of like community self-determination and autonomy and sovereignty. So thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. And I know that that your group and your lab at MIT has recently had a collaboration and partnership with Kristen and her team. So Kristen, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the data mapping project that your teams worked on. How did that collaboration start, and kind of what has it brought forth since you kicked it off?
Yeah, so how we got connected, I was an Indigenous fellow through Solve and presented a solution to use GIS online and story maps to address the issues of MMIWP, or missing murdered Indigenous women and people. And as Indigenous women, we face incredible rates of violence. I mean, we're murdered at a rate 10 times higher than the national average, and murder is our third leading cause of death. So as an org, we wanted to, like Catherine said, present solutions, not just highlight the problem. And a big part of that was the silencing of the issue, awareness of the issue, and the ability for us to tell our stories and amplify those stories as families and survivors. So the story maps was a natural sort of transition into that, creating awareness, but in connection to land, which is very important to us as Indigenous people. That solution is how we met at Solve. We were connected through the mutual love of GIS. And, you know, my love was very new, but definitely becoming a data activist. And it was over coffee and a muffin. And we just thought, you know, like what could come out of this? And I think that's the beautiful, like, you know, you get women together and like innovation is bound to happen, right? And what we found was we had this huge idea, and how could we break it down into several phases? And the first phase that was the most attainable, something we could get out there that was solution, was the creation of this MMIP digital resource map. As someone who is an activist and grassroots on the ground, providing healing and response to our families, one of the biggest issues we had was how do we work across these huge regions, sometimes internationally, cross-jurisdictionally, and finding other helpers that can help our families in local areas. So the creation of this map allowed us to do that, where we could geolocate where are these other activists, where are these other grassroots organizations. And not only that, but it would be really quick for families to sort of, they wouldn't have to filter through the organization, finding the contacts, what services do they provide, is it something they really need? That was already done for them. So it's increasing response time when response is, it's incredibly important to be quick. And what ended up being created was this international, what we call a Turtle Island map of North America from Canada, US, into Mexico, of all of those resources. And it's dynamic, it's ongoing. We understand that we have more resources to add. But through our federal work, we presented that to federal helpers who are also in response work with MMIP. And it's being used for a point of contact or for those feds who might not have connection to the grassroots helpers. And then that next phase was looking at providing case documentation for these families, because a lot of the work we do, we have to create our own tools because it's such a unique response. And we wanted to create a case documentation that would empower families, it would empower survivors, one, to not have to retell their story, that they could just present this report to authorities, to agencies about all of the justice that they have been trying to seek. But also over time, we could see the patterns in response, whether it's, and most times it's inequitable or lack of response for our families of MMIP. And then how do we turn that into policy, and how do we turn that into action? And we've actually been able to complete that together. And we want to be able to launch that not only within our organization, but share that with other grassroots organizations. And just wanted to say, like, her team of students has been so incredible in that they were actually able to come and visit us within our territory and get connected to our land, because that's a huge part of the solution. When we're talking about women, we can't forget about the earth. our first mother, our first grandmothers. So that was important for us in developing that together.
Great. Thank you. And we'll talk a little bit more about partnership and kind of values and leadership in a bit. But that is great. And congratulations both for that exciting update. We're really excited to see where that goes. Naledi, you talked a little bit about your organization, Brastorn. You enable users to connect without super expensive data bundles or having smartphones. So you're helping people with feature phones throughout Africa. Talk more about that. Why is this such a crucial offering, especially in that particular context? And what are you seeing in terms of the effects on women who use your solution, who use your tool in particular?
Thank you, Rachel, for the question. The digital divide is a really, really big problem in Africa, where access to smartphones and data bundles are limited. So just to put it into context, nearly 80% of mobile phone users use feature phones, which means that they can't access many of the advantages that come with being connected, right? So our mission is to bridge this gap by providing a platform that enables rural communities to connect using the simple technologies that are easily accessible for them. And these technologies may seem archaic in the first world, but they are very relevant in the African context. So we use technologies such as SMS and USSD that work on these devices. So we've been doing this in 4 countries and have reached about 4 million people now. And for women in particular, we've seen that our platform has been quite transformative. In many parts of Africa, women face so many barriers in accessing technology due to cultural, social, and economic factors. So when we provide a low cost and accessible way of communicating and accessing information, we enable women to connect with support networks that and the resources that they need to thrive. Our biggest use case, for example, is our agricultural platform, where about 60% of our users are women. And it's important to note that in Africa, agriculture is driven by women, where you find that women grow up to 70% of Africa's food. So our work in agriculture has enabled women to access information and the resources that they need to help improve their yield. This has been so effective that we've seen in some cases women improve their yields by up to as high as 115%. As well as a marketplace. So they're able to participate in a marketplace that can increase their incomes where they can sell their produce or livestock. So really our work really focuses on breaking down the barriers for digital access for women in Africa, especially female farmers.
So we're focusing this conversation on highlights, on successes, but we do know, I mean, there are so many barriers throughout the world for women. We know and we hear ad nauseum, like Catherine, to your point, the data that highlights that women entrepreneurs and startups are underfunded, that VC funding goes to a scarily low percentage of female founders, 2% or less. We know that many of our attendees today also answered questions in their registration when they joined us that said, you know, people share a very common viewpoint of as women being underfunded, undermentored, undervalued, underappreciated, silenced, etc. But you are all in leadership positions. You are doing the work of building new visions for what workplaces, what leadership, what structures and policies look like. So how are you actually doing that? What are examples of, in your organizations, what are the examples of the leadership styles, the policies that you're enabling or that you're showcasing that set us up for how we want things to look moving forward? And that'll be open to anyone. I see Tara.
I think I've tried very hard to always look far ahead because in education, it takes years to develop curriculum that will meet the needs of the workforce. And so by default, you have to look far ahead. And so we had the first mobile app education platform in 2010. This is before corporations even thought that mobile would be big. We started doing AI education back in 2016. So we are 8 years into the AI space. But we have a climate curriculum now because, as Kristen was saying, nature and climate are and women are very, very tightly interconnected. And we started doing that again like 5-6 years ago. The intersection of girls, climate, and tech. And I think what I learned, like for me, innovation is key because otherwise you'll be irrelevant. And I found it's not a gender thing really, but I think it's good leadership. How do you bring your team along? People hate change, but they also hate stagnation. So that's the hard part about being a leader, where how do you move a team towards something new, scary, uncomfortable? I've been running Technovation for 18 years now, and I think last year or about 2 years ago, we started this process of really figuring out how can we make a huge change in the world, because ours is the only model that's operating at a global scale and has shown proven impact that it changes girls' identity into STEM. And a linear growth path would help us reach a few million girls, but it was not going to make a dent in the world because gender inequality is so structural, as Catherine was saying. And so I did this exercise and we found that, okay, there's 600 million girls, adolescent girls in the world. What would it take to reach all of them? And that was an interesting exercise because I've never thought that way, where you need to have so much courage to be able to even ask that question. And it is a very scary question. And so we now have a strategic plan that's reaching 25 million girls over the next 10 to 15 years. But it was a very, very scary exercise for me myself to say, I'm going to put my name out there and say we're going to reach this huge number. And the big question is, what if I fail? I look stupid. And as humans, we hate that. And so I think just getting comfortable with that, guess what? Nobody cares what about you. And you got to have big goals. Otherwise, change will not happen. And I think that's what I've seen in this space, especially in the tech space, that industry leaders are hesitant to put their names behind big goals because they're afraid of failure. And I think everybody talks about embrace failure, but it's actually quite a different thing. It requires a lot of self-analysis to get comfortable with that, and to build an organization where that's the norm is not easy. My team is supportive of this, but every day we have to grapple with this because there's a whole another thing to publish a plan and say we're going to do it. It's a whole another thing to live it on a daily basis and to deal with a huge amount of uncertainty. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but figuring it out.
That's great. So big goals set out loud in public. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start. Other folks, Kristen.
Yeah, I think for us, and we're young, so we're still growing and learning, and that's part of like the roller coaster of like it's like terrifying and exciting all at the same time and really hard to work through. But we were really intentional about building a space that addressed a lot of the inequities that we face just being in a female body in a female vessel in institutional spaces, right? So we thought about our female cycles of menstruation all the way through menopause and making sure like we're supported in that and we're supporting each other, and you don't have to worry about getting fired or not paid because you can't come in and your emotions are all over the place or you're experiencing physical symptoms. We wanted to address the pay gap. We make sure that as an Indigenous woman, LGBTQ plus people, that we as an organization ensure that we are not only like coming equal, but we're surpassing that gap in how we pay our team and support our team members. And I think we really try to grow spaces of shared leadership and shared decision making. So it's not this top-down approach that we look at. We're very multi-generational here. We have youth all the way up to our elders within our team, and we want to create and encourage opportunity to grow future leaders. It's an apprenticeship model. And it's very much based off of our Indigenous ways of being and how we look at the female being as incredibly sacred and life-giving and like powerful. So we want to uplift that in our organization. And that's important to us. Like, how do we grow that? So every Monday, we have Medicine Monday. It's completely dedicated to our development as a team, mind, body, spirit, emotion. And I think, laying that foundation and allowing us to understand, like, as the caregivers and leaders of many parts of our life as, female beings, we as an organization want to ensure like you don't feel like we're another thing you have to juggle as a mom, as a caregiver, as a partner, as a sister, as a community leader. We want to create a system of support for our team as well. So those are just a few organizational structures that we're trying to put in place and have been able to.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Kristen. Naledi.
Thank you, Kristen, for that. I really resonate a lot with what you're saying. It's really, really important. And I love the work that you're doing. For me personally, in our context, it is really about having the right culture in place, a culture where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered. I believe in a culture where everyone's voice is heard and given the opportunity regardless of their position or background. So just echoing on Kristen's sentiment, it's sometimes that, and a lot of times that comes with exposure and providing opportunities to your team members as a leader. So in the context of a startup like us, moving away from kind of a heroic leadership style where the focus is on a particular leader and more of a shared leadership style, like she mentioned earlier on. We really believe in empowering our team through exposure, enabling them to work with diverse groups from all over the world, and through different projects, And let me just mention that the vast majority of our leadership team comprises of women. There are certain opportunities where you get, partners who want to deal with either just me or my co-founder. And we've had to push back a lot and say, but we do have capacity. We do have team members who can handle this. And we found that that is really, really being important. It's really been important in helping our team feel really valued and empowered and more inspired to work. And I really hope that more leaders, especially if they're growing in their leadership journey, are able to have the ability to empower their teams in such a way.
Thank you.
And maybe I'll just chime in to echo these thoughts about culture. I think my space is more of a research lab and within an academic institution. But in many ways, the concerns are the same. And so like a lot of what I think about with the Data Plus Feminism Lab is thinking about how to make a sort of warm and joyful space, kind of landing point where people can come and share their whole selves, which you often are not invited to do in academic environments. And also from which they can then be creative without having their ideas like immediately squashed. So like as I would say a woman in tech dominated fields myself, and then later in academic worlds, you're often told that your particular life experience doesn't matter, is not interesting, is not a worthy research question. And so sort of what I wanted to do when I had the ability to create my own space was to make space for all those things that people tell you are not important, because they actually are important. And I loved what Kristen was saying too about, thinking about things like menstruation and breastfeeding and cycles and all of these things that are also our more bodily processes, which end up getting sort of stigmatized and abstracted out of us in academic and scientific fields, and sort of like how do we make space for those also like embodied concerns as researchers. And I feel like if you can bring your whole self and all of your life experience, like so many innovations come from our life experiences. They come from friction that we encounter when the world is not set up for us and for our bodies. And that can be the beginning of a new idea, but new ideas need to be like watered and given sunshine. They need that supportive environment to thrive. And so that's sort of how I think about it.
I love that. I think we hear so much, Solve has been supporting entrepreneurs, the majority of whom are women over the course of the last 7-8 years. And we hear so often about wanting new styles of leadership or wanting to be able to embody new styles of leadership with different traits. And I think what we've said just now about moving away from heroic leadership styles to more shared leadership styles. I want to pose a question for anyone who wants to bite about that in particular. When we also talked a little bit about failure. So kind of pivoting when things go well, when things go great, when you have a win, when you know that you've hit the nail on the head with something, how do you celebrate that? How do you share that? We know that role models and mentorship and visibility is so important. And so how do we share the wins, the successes? How do we talk about what went really well and claim that in a way that also is balancing different embodiments from kind of that heroic leadership style? Tara.
I think one thing, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer your question, but I think the heroic leadership style, I feel, I think we are kind of alluding that, okay, that's a male tendency. But I'll say that, the reason why sometimes we all gravitate towards the classic hero's journey, like in films, is because I think we as humans really resonate with the story of the underdog, working hard, had big goals and met that goal. And so I think I think as just having hired hundreds of people over the years and kind of leading a team for almost 2 decades, I think people are really hungry for leadership. And I definitely hear the term servant leadership and but I want to push back a little bit, because when you're trying to do very hard things at large scale, consensus always is not going to get you there. And you need to have, you're not a operations officer. You're trying to take a team of people into new territory, and without having a clear vision, nobody's going to follow you. And a group of people, I think this is also, maybe this is not the normal way of thinking. I think that having a diverse group of people on your team is incredibly important. And for my team, we have more than 30 people. Most of them are women. We intentionally hire from different countries, but it comes at a cost too. And the cost is that it takes way harder, way longer to get consensus. And so I think people never really talk about that. And so for a small organization, which is trying to do a lot, and that's very, very always true in a nonprofit, the leader, you have to kind of balance these things where, yeah, like what is the cost that you're willing to let go of or absorb if you for speed, efficiency, agility. And I think those are trade-offs all the time. But what I've seen is that there are many nonprofits, and because I've been in this space for so long, I've seen my peers move on from their nonprofits after 10 years. And the reason is that it's very hard to come up with a vision. And you can have incremental growth that is not going to move the needle. And so then all of these things get very hard. It's harder to get funding, because guess what? You've got to inspire your funders to follow your vision. And so I think that I totally hear that heroic leadership is not a sought after style. But when you look at the Hollywood blockbusters or the most famous films that the whole world resonates with, or majority of the people resonate with, they fall under a certain kind of category that says we're all we want safety, we want to follow someone who we can believe and trust in, that will take us to a great place. And so those are all things to balance, but
Absolutely. Thank you
those
for
are my points of view.
Thank you. I think that's great. Others on kind of the leadership traits that you strive to embody or want to see cultivated, especially when things go well. Already. And then Kristen.
Okay. Thank you. For me, I think one of the most important traits that I think should really be nurtured is empathy and integrity. In my journey, I've seen those to be, the most important. Integrity in terms of not just in how you relate with your team, but also in how you relate with your partners and your network. And then empathy in terms of how you relate with your team, being able to stand in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, has played a really, really significant role in building and ensuring that people feel empowered and take up the challenge and follow your vision, like Tara has been saying. So I really I agree with a lot of what she's been saying, and I think it's really, really insightful. And I just wanted to note that it is heroic leadership is important. Especially in the beginning when you are inspiring people and you're trying to get them along on your journey. But I think at some point, as a leader, sometimes bandwidth becomes a problem, and therefore that's when the shared leadership also as a concept comes into play. So I think it just depends as well on the stage as in terms of where you are heading as a company.
Ditto. No, I was going to talk about integrity and compassion. It, we model our leadership and the way that we make decisions off of our culture. So it comes from our clan systems and how we govern ourselves as First Nations people. So it's a bit of both. It's not necessarily heroic or shared. It's kind of both. Each of our clans, have a specific role and duty and responsibility. And then there's a leadership system within that clan. But we all have a voice that's brought to the table. So that's the leadership style and governance structure that we use within our org, and it works for us. And I think you have to find what works for you, your vision, your mission, and your org that you're wanting to complete. But I just hear my mom's like very simple words of, if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. So really we live and breathe our vision and mission. It's a way of life for us, to uplift life in spaces of healing and learning ultimately. And that's what we try to bring into the organization. It's integrity, heart-led decision making.
Wonderful. And when it comes to leadership examples, to role models, who are some of the people, or do you have an example in your heads of who you look to, and key pieces of advice, key pieces of wisdom that you've held close?
I think it's a combination of several different leaders in my life. My mother would be the first, who just had that balance of when I need to be stern and assert myself, and then the compassion and giving. She was very fluid and flexible in that. In her leadership, she led through example. A lot of the grandmothers in our lodge who do the same thing. They are incredible leaders and knowledge holders. And also I think of like our former Grand Chief of our lodge. He was this male being, but he carved out and created this space for Indigenous women leadership spaces, and what that looks like in balance with each other, that it's not a competition between male and female body, that we can actually work together and create some really beautiful things. Wilma Mankiller, Judith LeBlanc, these are my organizing Native heroes in the world. So yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
Anyone else? Catherine.
Maybe on the topic of powerful Indigenous women, I just want to do a shout out to this organization called Indigenous Women Rising, and I'm on their board. And I feel that I've actually learned a lot from their style of leadership. And so they've grown from a just teeny little 3-person collective into a much larger organization now. They work on reproductive justice for Native people. They're based in the Southwest. And just one of the things that I have seen over their whole time is their leader, executive director, has consistently, even when they had no money, they weren't bringing in any money, it was like a completely volunteer run organization. The leader was always looking for ways to mentor her relatives and colleagues into the organization, almost before the organization really didn't even exist. And then as the organization has grown, she has looked for ways to mentor and teach and care for the employees in a way that's I would say is very different from the typical nonprofit industrial complex model of labor, where you just really pay people very little money and extract lots of money from them. And I'll just speak from my own experience with my worst job ever was a nonprofit organization. It was very underpaid, and it almost had a complete burnout from that job. And so it's been amazing to watch this nonprofit grow, and that style of leadership that I think really values and invests in and models mentorship and sharing power, and investment in people. And so that, I just feel like I've taken a lot out of that, and it's given me a lot of things to reflect about in terms of how I want to run the spaces that I'm a leader in. So yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Naledi, I saw an inkling from you earlier. Do you want to add in?
Yeah, I'm much like Kristen. My mom has, she's one of my biggest inspirations and a huge role model for me. She comes from a very poor background and has really fought through a lot of challenges for her to achieve the success that she has. She's driven, she cares a lot about impact and women empowerment and has won international awards for the work she's done for HIV and AIDS in Botswana and public health policy. And the traits that she really demonstrates that inspires me the most is grit. She's very resilient, really, really keeps pushing no matter how hard things get. And I've really seen her employ a very unique style of mentorship where she really makes sure that when she mentors someone, she does it in a way that moves the needle for them. So she really, really invests herself in mentorship in a way that it's like the person should have really gone through some sort of transformation. And I try to do the same as well. And another role model for me is one of our board members, Lori Fuller. She's just incredible. She takes up presence in a room, makes sure that her voice is heard. And what I find the most inspiring about her is her empathy. She's very empathetic, while still making sure that she has a assertive and a firm stance in her views and expressing herself. So that's something that I find inspiring as well.
And we have a question in the chat that's come in, so I'll pose this to anyone who has an idea on the panel here. How would you help, or what advice would you give for girls or young women who have brilliant ideas, great ideas, but don't have the innovations or the fruition of those ideas because they don't have enough resources to make that happen or to actually invent what is in their head? Where would you direct them? How would you tell them to start so that seed of brilliance doesn't get lost?
Apply for Solve.
And I didn't even tell you to say that, but yes, of course.
Yeah. No, I think, find within your network, you often find what you need. And even if it's within the network, somebody who can find somebody for the thing that you need, whether it's the funding or the developers or helping you bring that idea into reality. Look into your relationship base and who's in there and start that conversation and sort of start brainstorming, like, who do you know that can help me bring this to life?
Great. So network, reaching out to people that are already there that you might not have just made a direct connection or direct ask of. Naledi.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's what has worked for me. I'm reaching into my network, seeing who I know who could potentially help me. But what's also really important is really putting yourself out there. I love Tara's response about the power of, free tools available on the internet. The internet was a huge resource for me in the early stages, and I was just aggressively looking for opportunities, applying for them. A lot I've missed out on, but some have actually gotten me somewhere. And it's really, really a great resource just to use. The opportunities are there. Just really be aggressive about finding them and putting yourself out there.
And just to add to that, I would say use generative AI tools or use ChatGPT to ask a whole bunch of questions about, here's my idea, here's the problem, what should I be doing? The kinds of tools that we have today are just unheard of, and they are free. And the kinds of education capable, like learning courses that we have access to is mind-blowing. I think in my Women in AI event that we did on 2 days ago, we had the senior AI scientist from NVIDIA share all the most powerful AI courses that NVIDIA has to offer. It's all free. And so I think the biggest thing for me is discipline, to be able to sort of set a goal and say, I need to learn this over the next so many, and then based on that, you can reach out to the experts in that space and say, I've done this. Here's what I've built. How can I take this forward? Because people have too many ideas. Ideas to me are almost just the tiny starting point, but it's the execution, showing a prototype, showing you put in the work, showing that you really care about this. I think and you've done the work. I think that's the next step.
And I would say, don't give up. So I think that's really important because, like, I've seen folks, and I often have to encourage my own students, it's like the first, thing that I get turned down for funding, or the first time somebody says something critical about their idea and like they have their balloon is punctured. But I think it's one of the ways that things really happen in the world is by people not taking no for an answer. So like people being persistent through setbacks, critical feedback. And like I said, I think women would probably experience more of this, like more not funding, more critical feedback. And so it's like extra important to be able to push through some of those you know, setbacks and continue on your way, and to continue believing in your idea and why it really does matter for you and your community. So yeah.
That's great. We have enough time for just a couple more audience Q&A, so quick answers and we'll pop through as many as we can. We have an interesting question about leadership from Danielle B. Thanks, Danielle. What do you all think about leadership and organizational longevity? What systems do you think about putting in place to support yourself and ensure the organization goes on once you leave?
I think
I
for
can
us,
take it. Oh,
go.
go for it,
No, go
Kristen.
ahead, Jer.
I was just chatting with June about this. I think it's time. I mean, I'm really actively thinking about succession planning because I've been running this organization for 20 years. But I still think that I need to build a base where innovation is in our DNA. We have core values. Integrity is one big one. We have built in integrity into our systems because everything is dependent on impact data. But I think innovation is a little harder. I mean, I've read hundreds of books on innovation culture, and the biggest innovative companies don't get it right. They have to call back the founder many times because the new CEO didn't manage to get things right. And so that's something that's really big on my mind, but intentionally trying to sort of figure out what are the key elements of it. What does it look like? What does it mean? And then to try to train it into the organization's operations ongoing.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is such a good note to end on, kind of embedding the values that we want to see in the future into the very organizations where we have some kind of power, some kind of leadership abilities, and really thinking about, I'm going to come away from today thinking about nuggets that all of the panelists have said. So thank you all for joining us. And I think, thinking about innovation as kind of the thing that comes out of the friction of lived experiences and the difficulties and the tenacity and the grit that we enable and embody in order to overcome those things is something that I'll keep front of mind. We'll bring June back in to say a couple words, and thank you all so much for joining us. We're so thrilled that everyone gave up an hour of their time to really participate and really listen and hear and have a dialogue about this topic. We covered so many different things. My head is spinning, and we have great shout outs in the chat for folks that want to join. I'll just plug, Tara, what you said at the beginning of needing judges for your upcoming projects for Technovation. The link is in the chat. If you want to give some of your time to that, we highly encourage that. If you have a great solution that is tech enabled, that is helping drive innovation around the world, the MIT Global Challenges are open now. So please apply. We'll throw that link in the chat as well. June.
Well, I told the audience that this panel is a treasure, and you've all been an incredible treasure. But with one of the questions that was asked about what to do, Tara, I would have said, join Technovation, look up our group, and Kristen, look at our mapping and see what you can do, and the Letty, we're doing things without internet and with internet, look that up. And Catherine, look at the work that I'm doing. So I just want to give you all accolades. And I just cannot be prouder of all of you here. And I know that we learned a lot as we expected. So thank you all for your time and just your pure brain power experience. Thank you.
Right. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your days, evenings, mornings, wherever you are in the world. We'll see you soon.